Okay, hello everyone. So this is for my resource intervention. So I'm going to be talking about two different videos that I shared today that really center around the concept of person-centered care and dementia and the different ways that we can kind of conduct that kind of care. And so I provided two different videos, as I said, and it's really based around this concept of how we can continue valuing the personhood of persons with dementia and truly take in what they have to offer. And so this is all done through Naomi Feil, you can see right here. And she refers to this as the validation method. And so Naomi was a pioneer in the person-centered care movement and was actually the founder of validation therapy in dementia care. And so she was an individual who stood up for all persons with dementia that she interacted with, and she really kind of emphasized meeting them where they were and the moment that they were living in. And so to begin the first video that I shared, she talks about examples of several people who had dementia that she interacted with. And one of these was Isidore Rose and the journey that she experienced with him. So she talks a lot about the inappropriate, almost nonsensical things that he would say, like curse words and sudden random street names. And he was always inquiring about the attic. And so she would often ignore him at first and kind of just put it off as nonsense that she didn't understand. But she later came to find that what he was saying really all meant something to him. So, for example, he was curious about the attic because his sister later revealed to Naomi that their dad used to punish Isidore in the attic, and then the street name that he was saying was actually where he grew up. So after she came out finding this all out, it completely changed her approach to caring for people with dementia. And so she then kind of goes into how she cared for a woman named Elizabeth and how that first interaction with Isidore impacted this care. So Elizabeth used to be a bookkeeper for an electricity business, and once she moved into the nursing home that Naomi was working at, she would use her pocketbook as a filing cabinet, and she would ask the other residents if the business was meeting at certain rooms that day because she still believed that she was working at the electricity business amidst her diagnosis. So instead of trying to tell Elizabeth that she was not at work, Naomi discussed the importance of putting herself in Elizabeth's world and meeting her where she was most happy. So this is really where Naomi introduces an example of allowing persons with dementia to maintain their identity despite the diagnosis, or more specifically, kind of validating their personhood. And then Naomi starts to talk about the specifics of the concept of personhood and how no one ever really loses their identity. It's more just up to us who are caring for them to help them bring their identity out rather than shut them down as just saying quote unquote nonsense. So moving into the second half of this video, Naomi talks about how it's more of a losing logic than losing identity with a dementia diagnosis, and how loved ones who think they might be actually losing the person who's been diagnosed can really change their mindset on this. So as a form of change, she provides very simple advice, and that is to just listen and avoid the stigma of finding persons with dementia to be versions of what can sometimes be referred to as the living dead. And for kind of specifics on this, Naomi teaches about how persons with dementia see the world through the mind's eye rather than the mind's logic. So, for example, many people who have dementia will say things like they need to speak with their mom or they need to go visit their dad, but their parents have already died. So Naomi talks about how we can meet them exactly where they are in that moment. And we don't have to necessarily lie to them for redirection and say things like, oh, they'll be right back. But we can sit and talk with them and learn more about their parents and ask questions. And that will kind of intrigue their interest and allow them to develop and understand those feelings that they have. And then similarly, people with dementia will also tend to lose their verbal abilities. So things they say will sometimes come out slurring. So instead of just thinking that they make no sense, we can really change that mindset by sitting down to help them figure out what it is they're trying to say. And this is where patience and validation is kind of at its peak form, because even when it may not make sense to us what they're saying, it does make sense to that individual. So it's really just allowing them to have someone that's there to listen. Naomi then talks about how feelings that were kept inside for so long can begin to reveal themselves in a dementia diagnosis. So specific examples that she provided were talking about how a woman who fears a man on TV isn't necessarily quote unquote crazy, but rather she could have been raped in her younger years. And so she's expressing those true feelings that she might have been forced to keep in solitude for so long. Or a man that she specifically worked with would always yell and tell people to shut up, but this is because he was the youngest of 11 siblings that would always tell him to shut up when he was growing up. So this is just how people with dementia might put their expressions and feelings that they've had to keep bottled up for so long out into the world. And then before kind of moving into the final, I would say 5 or 8 minutes or so of the first video, which will begin to lead us into the second video discussion, Naomi explains the importance of thinking about how we would want our personhood to be upheld were we in the same position one day as those who are currently living with dementia. So we might think about the things like food or music or culture that's important to us and how that all builds to create our identity. And so the same way that we would want to think about someone doing that for us, we have to currently do for those who are living with dementia. So this is kind of getting us into the second video. So Naomi, like I mentioned earlier, was one of the pioneers for person-centered care movement. And this was something that was evident through pushback that she discussed from administration at nursing homes that she would work in. And a lot of the pushback that she received was because of the touch validation that she used to really connect with people who have dementia. And so is an interaction between Naomi Feil and Gladys Wilson, which is an interaction that she's fairly well known for. But this is a much shorter video than the first one that I shared, but it really embodies what it means to provide person-centered care. So Gladys is in the late stages of dementia, where she is just continuing repetitive movements like head bobbing and arm shaking. But Naomi doesn't take this as a fault and instead tries to take it as an opportunity to really understand and interact with her. So as Naomi's interacting with her, she notices that Gladys lets a single tear out, and Naomi interprets this as a sign of need for Gladys. So Naomi begins singing with her, and Gladys will suddenly move her arms to the beat of the music that Naomi's singing. And then as Naomi begins to kind of caress her face, you can see Gladys's breathing slowing down and matching the tempo and the breathing of Naomi. And so it's then that we kind of see Gladys have this moment of clarity where it's no longer appears that dementia's in control, but instead Gladys has found peace through Naomi's patience and understanding. And so to me, that was just such a beautiful thing to watch. And I love this video because I think it really embodies what it means for us to be in the moment and respect and love people who have dementia despite a diagnosis and not see it as a setback. But ultimately, these two videos really highlight how important it is for us to not just cast off persons with dementia because of their diagnosis. Instead, we should more so take it as an opportunity to listen and get to know them even more. Because persons with dementia can really take as much of the world as we are willing to give to them. So it truly is up to us to create a safe and validating space for them to continue embracing their identity. And I was going to try showing this video, but I can't really get it to work. So whenever the link gets sent out, then you'll be able to see a little bit better the touch validation method that I was referring to.